Good evening. I call to order this meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. We have 6 members present this evening and our student representatives, so we do have a quorum. This time I'd like to invite you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence, led by Board Member Gesford.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This time we'll have approval of this evening's agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Pickford. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving this evening's agenda? All right, we have 6 affirmative votes, and the student member concurs. Okay, we'll now have approval of the minutes.
I move for the approval of the retreat closed session minutes dated August 17th, 2019.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there any discussion? Okay, the motion is on approval of the minutes from the August 17th board member retreat, which is a closed session. All those in favor? All right, we have 5 affirmative votes. Any abstentions? 1 abstention. Thank you.
President Williams? I move for the approval of the retreat compliance checklist and written statement minutes dated August 17th, 2019.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. All those in favor?
See the second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Second.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Any additions or corrections to those minutes? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 affirmative votes, abstaining. 2 abstentions. Motion carries.
President Williams, I move for the approval of the closed session minutes dated August 20th, 2019.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. All those in favor? Okay, we have 5 affirmative votes. Any abstentions? And 1 abstention. Motion carries.
President Williams, I move for the approval of the business meeting minutes dated August 20th, 2019.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Any additions or corrections? All those in favor? 5 affirmative, abstentions. Okay, 1 abstention. Motion carries.
President Williams, I move for the approval of Human Resources closed session minutes dated August 27th, 2019.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Any discussion, additions or corrections? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 affirmatives. By way of explanation, I have here a statement regarding those minutes. There was a meeting on August 27th. The Board of Education's Human Resources Committee conducted its scheduled public meeting, and there was a portion of the meeting that was closed to discuss a confidential personnel matter in accordance with Section 3-305B 1 and 2 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, and for that reason, there had to be minutes taken of that closed session. So, all right, so can we have a re-showing of the vote for that, please? All right, so we have 6 affirmative votes. Thank you.
President Williams, I move for the approval of Human Resources compliance checklist and written statement minutes dated August 27th, 2019.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. All those in favor?
Need a second.
A second.
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 Thank you, Mr. Reitenauer. Any additions or corrections to those minutes or that checklist? All those in favor? Okay, unanimous, 6 votes, affirmative. Is that it, Mrs. Murray?
Yes.
That's it? All righty, thank you very much. At this time, we have our public comment portion of the meeting. Is there anyone who wishes to come forward? I have no one signed up in advance. Okay, seeing no one, we'll move to our first item under old business, which is the second reading of proposed changes to policy ECAB, access to Board of Education, schools, and Board of Education property. Good evening, Mr. Trotta.
Good evening, thank you. On August 20th, the Board of Education approved the first reading of the proposed changes to policy ECAB. The community was provided with an opportunity to offer comments. We did not receive any comments. The Policy Committee is requesting the Board of Education's approval of the second reading of this particular policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy ECAB entitled Access to Board of Education Schools and Board of Education Property.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second? Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any discussion? Mrs. Fisher, is there anything that you'd like to say as chair of the committee?
No, what passed on first read, I think it's obviously been accepted. There were no complaints.
All right, thank you. We'll move to the vote. The motion is to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy ECAB entitled Access to Board of Education Schools and Board of Education Property. All those in favor? Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes and the student member concurs. Motion carries. Mr. Trotta.
Yes, the next policy we would request the board to consider is policy EFGH, which concerns surveillance cameras. And once again, on August the 20th, the Board of Education approved the first reading of the proposed changes to this policy. We have not received any comments regarding these proposed changes, and the Policy Committee is requesting the approval of this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy EFGH entitled Surveillance Cameras.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Any discussion or any questions regarding this policy? Yes, Mr. Gessler.
Just have 2 quick questions. How many buses have cameras on?
All buses have cameras on them, including the contractor buses.
Great. And staff and students are informed by the employee handbook or the student handbook? Is that how they get notified?
The bus has notification in the front of the bus, and it's also in the student handbook.
That is correct.
Any other questions? Anything you'd like to say, Mrs. Fisher?
I'd just say that they were very minor changes that we made to this policy, so there's nothing really controversial, I don't believe.
Thank you. So the motion is to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy EFGH entitled Surveillance Cameras. All those in favor? All right, we have 6 affirmative votes, and the student member concurs. Motion carries. I believe we have another policy, Mr. Trotta.
Yes. This is policy KI entitled Visitors to Schools. And the Board of Education approved the first reading of the proposed changes and updates to this policy on August the 20th. We have not received any comments concerning the proposed changes, and the Policy Committee is requesting the approval of the second reading of the proposed changes to policy KI. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy KI entitled Visitors to Schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there any discussion? Any questions from Mr. Trotta or Mrs. Fisher? No? Okay, then we'll move to the vote. The motion is to approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy KI entitled Visitors to School. All those in favor? All right, we have 6 affirmative votes. Student member concurs. Motion carries. And I believe we have a first reading of a policy, Mr. Trotta.
That is correct. In 2018, Governor Hogan signed into law Senate Bill 1265, which is known as the Maryland Safe to Learn Act of 2018. This new law requires all local boards of education in Maryland to adopt a behavioral threat assessment policy that is consistent with the policy developed by the Maryland Center for School Safety. Staff developed this new proposed policy, JLD, in light of the guidance provided by the Maryland Center for School Safety and in consultation with the Policy Committee. A behavioral threat assessment is a structured process that is used to identify, assess, and address the risk of threats of targeted violence posed by an individual or by a group. It is important to note that prior to the development of this policy, the Board of Education has always had in place a threat assessment protocol for the schools. The Policy Committee is requesting the Board of Education's approval of the first reading of policy JLD. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. I failed to note that this is our first item of new business, consideration of this policy. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the first reading of proposed policy JLD entitled School Safety, Threat Assessment Team and Behavior Threat Assessment Policy.
Mrs. Fisher, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gesper. Is there any discussion or any questions about this policy?
I will just say that most of this policy came from the model policy that was provided through the Maryland Center for Safety, and it's very detailed and I think very necessary in today's climate.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Anyone else? Okay, the motion is to approve the first reading of proposed policy JLD entitled School Safety, Threat Assessment Team, and Behavior Threat Assessment Policy. All those in favor? Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes. Student member concurs. Motion carries. And our second item of new business is another first reading. Mr. Trotta?
Yes, good evening. This concerns policy JFH entitled Prohibiting Bullying, Harassment, or Intimidation. The Board of Education's current policy prohibits cyberbullying and sexual harassment. The Maryland Legislature adopted a new law requiring the reporting of harassment that is of a sexual nature. The new law also sets forth procedures for providing notice of an alleged act of harassment, bullying, or intimidation. The Policy Committee is recommending modifications to this policy in light of the changes adopted by the Maryland General Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy JFH entitled Policy Prohibiting Bullying, Harassment, and Intimidation.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Is there any discussion or any questions? No? Then we'll move to the vote. The motion is on approval of the first reading of proposed changes to policy JFH entitled Policy Prohibiting Bullying, Harassment, or Intimidation. All those in favor? All right, we have 6 affirmative votes. Student member concurs. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Our next item of business is a donation. Good evening, Dr. Akers.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael. I'm here on behalf of Smithsburg High School to request permission to accept a generous donation of 20 engines, assorted tools, and teaching resources valued at $10,000 to $12,000 from the Briggs & Stratton Corporation. The engines and related resources will be used for instructional purposes in the Power Mechanics 1 and Power Mechanics 2 classes at Smithsburg High School. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Akers. Is there a motion?
Madam President, move to approve the donation of 20 engines, assorted small engine tools, and teaching resources valued at approximately $10,000 to $12,000 to Smithsburg High School from Briggs and Stratton.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there any discussion or any questions for Dr. Akers? Okay, then we'll move for approval. The motion is to approve a donation of 20 engines, assorted small engine tools, and teaching resources valued at approximately $10,000 to $12,000 to Smithsburg High School from Briggs and Stratton. All those in favor? Right, we have 6 affirmative votes, and the student member concurs. Motion carries. A big thank you to Briggs and Stratton for their generous donation to Smithsburg High School.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next matter of business, which is our consent agenda for this evening. Mr. Bakewell, good evening.
President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael, tonight I have 5 items for your review. The Purchasing Review Committee reviewed these items, and they are being recommended for approval. And staff is available if you have additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bakewell. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the awards and renewals for snow removal, renewal to Advantage Landscape and Construction, Inc., Man Construction, Inc., Smithsburg Rental Service, and East Coast Landscaping and Excavating at the amounts listed on the summary of renewal. Provision and delivery of liquid propane gas to Thompson Gas at the bid factor, plus average rack price per gallon, Baltimore, Maryland terminal. Guided reading books and comprehension sets to Scholastic Education at a total cost of $389,074.07. Professional development for math recovery to U.S. Math Recovery Council at a cost of $68,520. And electric supply services to Direct Energy Business, LLC at a cost of 0.04918 per kilowatt hour.
Thank you, Mr. Bakewell. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any questions for Mr. Bakewell? Any discussion? All right, then we'll move to the vote on Mr. Bickford's motion. All those in favor of approval of tonight's consent agenda? We have 6 affirmative votes. The student member concurs. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our 4th quarter FY 2019 budget adjustments. Good evening, Mr. Brandenburg.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, and Dr. Michael. As we begin a school year today, a new one, we are wrapping up the accounting for the last school year. Our audit is nearing completion, and I bring you 4th quarter adjustments tonight. These adjustments are rather small in terms of percentages, and we have several favorable variances above, and where we redeployed that money below, an overall net effect on the fund balance of $586,839. And I will be happy to try to answer any questions that you have about these adjustments. Upon your approval of this, we will take it to the county commissioners for approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brandenburg. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the proposed FY 2019 4th quarter budget adjustments as presented, and subsequent to the approval of the 4th quarter adjustments by the Board of County Commissioners to designate the year-end fund balance of $586,839 to designated fund balance for the purpose of renovations to Washington County Technical High School as part of the development of new programs for artificial intelligence and cloud computing, as well as applied manufacturing engineering.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Any discussion? Any questions?
I have one question. What is our fund balance setting at right now?
The undesignated fund balance with this addition will be about $4.8 million, and then when that'll come back out upon approval, so it'll be right down about 4.3.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so the motion is to approve the proposed FY 2019 4th quarter budget adjustments as presented, and subsequent to the approval of the 4th quarter adjustments by the Board of County Commissioners to designate the year-end fund balance of $586,839 to designated fund balance for the purpose of renovations to Washington County Technical High School as part of the development of new programs for artificial intelligence and cloud computing, as well as applied manufacturing engineering. All those in favor? All right, we have 6 affirmative votes. Student member concurs. Motion carries.
Thank you very
much. Okay, our next item under consideration is the state and local fiscal year 2021 capital improvement program.
Good evening, Mrs. Williams, Dr. Michael, members of the board. Mr. Rollins and I are here this evening to review the capital improvement program for FY21. I'll take you through the first couple of slides, walking you through the program, some of the normal demographics of the program. Mr. Rollins will take you through the actual projects that we are looking to submit. First and foremost, we remind you every year that this is our fiscally responsible, prioritized long-range plan that addresses renovation and modernization needs. It identifies and resolves seat capacity issues, addresses systemic renovation needs for systems, minimizes local costs through strategic state funding, and reduces the building replacement cycle and operational costs. It's also worth noting as we head into the next slide that this also aligns with the 2019 Educational Facilities Master Plan that was approved by this board back in, I believe that was first week of June, and was presented to the county commissioners this summer as well. It reflects the current state cost per square foot at $329 for building construction plus 19%, or which is equivalent of $62 per square foot for site work. It assumes that 71% of the eligible construction costs will be funded by the state government through the public school construction program, with 29% being funded by the local government. And it follows the currently approved instructions for submission to the public school construction program. One item of note before we move on, and I bring in Mr. Rollins to do the details, is we understand that later this month, the Interagency Commission on School Construction will be reviewing the cost share percentages. We have set this plan and are seeking your approval on the current 71% model. If our percentage goes up, meaning let's say it would go to 74%, which would mean a lesser local match, we will adjust the numbers pursuant to the new change and submit the capital improvement plan. If our change locally goes in the other direction, perhaps the local share now is 31% with a 69% state match, we will come back to you to seek additional approval because it would require more funding on the local level. And with that, I'll turn to Mr. Rollins.
Okay, I'm going to go through the fiscal year 21, the current year's request in some detail, and then we'll outline the outlying 5 years beyond that in a little bit less detail. Our first request for 21 is the Sharpsburg Elementary School. This, the $7 million requested between the state and local agencies represents the last request for this school. The money wouldn't be received till July. The school will be opening, will be open at that point with us doing demolition of the old school. You can see the total cost of the project and the state and local funding to date. The project is well on its way, on schedule, and within the budget, and we're doing fine. The next project that we're asking is a systemic project for South Hagerstown High School, roof replacement. This is the second phase of roofing at the school. We did part of the roof, I think, two or 3 years ago, and now we want to finish it up. We've received some state funding already for that in the current fiscal year, $294,000, and we're seeking the balance to complete that project from the state and the local government. Third project, Smithsburg High School HVAC replacement. It's almost a $6 million project. Would have state funding of $3.7 million, and local money needing would be $2.1 million there. Western Heights Middle School roof is a $2.6 million project. The state and local split there is $1.7 million and about $950,000. Finally, the last systemic we're requesting this year would be the North Hagerstown High School chiller replacement. We think that's going to be about a $1 million project, with the state shouldering $640,000 and about $390,000 needed from local government. Finally, the last project we'd be asking for funding for in fiscal 21 would be the preliminary engineering, site layout work needed to start up the school number 1 project. That's completely locally funded. Then we'd move into the next year into a planning process, do the design, again, local funding, and then you'll see that we start requesting state funding out in fiscal year 23. So with that, for fiscal year 21, you can see that each of the projects lined up there. We're requesting $10.3 million from the state, and it would require a match from the local government of about $8.7 million, totaling $19 million in fiscal year 21. Moving on to fiscal year 22 in less detail, again, we'd be asking about $2 million from the local government to pay for architectural and engineering services and getting the project ready to bid and out on the street. And we have 5 systemic projects that year, totaling about $12.8 million, with 8 coming from the state and 4.7 coming from the local government. In fiscal year 23, it would be our first request of state funding for school number 1, $11.8 million with a nearly $8 million local match required. The systemic projects, there would be 3 of them, totaling about $8.4 million, with 5.3 coming from the state and 3.1 coming from local government. We'd also then start the planning process for school number 2. It would be our first request for funding for school number 2. And that's that same $500,000 we're asking for in fiscal year 21 for the first school. So we're lining these up in a systematic way and asking for the funding. In fiscal year 24, the 4th year of funding would be asked for school number 1, the 2nd year from the state. The systemic projects total 3 again, at about $13.6 million, with 8.6 coming from the state, and you can see the totals there. We'd also be asking for the $2 million for school number 2 to do the architectural services there. In 25, it would be the final year of funding for school number 1, 3rd year of funding for school number 2. We have 4 systemic projects planned in that year, and school number 3 would again then start up on this 2-year cycle that we've asked for at $500,000 to start the planning. Finally, in FY26, school number 2 would be in its 4th year and well under construction. School number 3 would be finishing up its design, and we have 5 systemic projects that we would request that year. So, in total, you can see each year's request. It's a big number, but it's what we feel we really need. It finishes 2 schools. Sharpsburg will be finished within this funding cycle, as well as school number 1. School number 2 would be well into construction, and school number 3 would be being designed. It also includes 24 systemic projects, roofs, HVAC replacements, electrical distribution replacements, boilers, chillers, and probably some AstroTurf. So that's where we are.
Okay. It's probably worth reminding the board as well, just like with the facilities master plan, this is a plan that changes year in and year out based on what we see from our funding partners, both the state and the county level, based on other needs that may arise that may move one project in front of the other. A failure of a system more in advanced stages than we anticipated at a faster date might move it up to the hot burner and move something else back to the rear burner. Same thing with projects. If all of a sudden we have an influx of housing needs and we need infrastructure and we need seats and we need capacity, we might build something before we do one of the new proposed schools. So the program is fluid, and this is just, while it's a 5-year plan, it's really a 1-year request.
Looking for a motion, please?
I move to approve the state and local FY 2021 Capital Improvement Program CIP plan.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Any questions, any discussion? No, I have a question I would like to ask. 2020 capital improvement funding locally from our funding partner? What is that number, do you know?
Current fiscal year?
Uh-huh.
$4 million.
2020. How much?
$4 million.
4 million. So we're really looking for next fiscal year 2021, we're looking for twice that amount.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Okay, so the motion is to approve the state and local fiscal year 2021 capital improvement program plan. All those in favor? All right, we have 6 affirmative votes, and student member concurs, motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Ready for superintendent's report?
Yes, indeed. That's our next item on the agenda, your report, sir.
We'll begin that with Maureen Margovich, our Justice Accountability Supervisor, and Dr. Pugh, our Chief Academic Officer, Associate Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. Last week, the state released the MCAP/PARC data publicly, and this is our public annual report to the board. And I've asked these two individuals to share information. I'd also like to note that Dr. Hanks and Courtney Lear are in the audience. A great deal of the backbone of our ELA leadership team. Obviously, we're very, very proud of our students and our teachers and ESP administrators, all that worked hard to move our students forward in preparation for the 21st century. So, Dr. Pugh.
Good evening.
Mrs. Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael, we're pleased to share with you the MCAP Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program data for ELA and math for 2019. We'll start, I'll orient you to the slide first since all of the slides look very similar. The MCAP is divided into 5 performance levels from 1, which is not yet met expectations, through the highest level, which is actually the not yet met is the red on your screen. The blue represents students who exceeded expectations. So between that we have for the orange, partially met expectations, yellow is approached expectations, and green is met expectations. We created a green bubble to demonstrate the proficiency at each grade level. This is 40.7% of our students are meeting or exceeding expectations. And that would be the percent of students that are proficient. The green arrows will represent an all-time high. So we had an all-time high percentage of students who were exceeding expectations at that level 5 for grade 3 ELA. We also had an all-time high for the percent of students who were proficient at 40.7%. For grade 3 math, we had 41.0% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations. We had an all-time high in the percent of students exceeding expectations at 9.8%, and 41.0 was an all-time high for students meeting proficiency. For grade 4 ELA, we had 41.8% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations, an all-time high again at level 5 with 11.1%, and that 41.8 was an all-time high for proficiency. For grade 4 math, we had 37.1% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations, with an all-time high at the exceeding expectations with 5.0% of our students at that level. For grade 5 ELA, we had 46.1% of our students at the proficiency level. We had all-time highs at 5.6% exceeding expectations and the 46.1 proficiency. For grade 5 math, we had 38.6% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations. 7.1% of those was an all-time high for our exceeding expectations. And our proficiency here also was an all-time high at 38.6. For grade 6 ELA, we had 44.7% of our students at proficiency. We had all-time high at 9.1% of our students exceeding expectations, and the all-time high at the proficiency level also. For grade 6 math, we had 32.3% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations with an all-time high of 5.5% exceeding. For grade 7 ELA, 52.6% of our students met proficiency, all-time high of 20% exceeding expectations, and then also the all-time high for the proficiency. For grade 7 math, we had 35.3% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations, with an all-time high of 6.3% exceeding. For grade 8 ELA, we had 53.7% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations, all-time highs at 13.7% exceeding, as well as the all-time high for proficiency. For grade 8 math, I do want to remind you that this does not include our students who take high school level courses in the middle school. So this only includes students who actually participate in the grade 8 math assessment. We had 17.7% of our students exceeding or meeting expectations. All-time high, we did have students in our highest level, as well as an all-time high in the meeting and exceeding. As part of the state presentation, they rank the counties. We looked at ELA 3 through 8. We were above the state average. You can see the green bar. We grew 3.8 percentage points, and this was the third highest in the state in ELA for 3 through 8. For math 3 through 8, again, we were above the state average. We did not see any increases, but no one else did either. We either had flat or negative growth this year for math 3 through 8. Moving on to the high school level, ELA 10, we had 50.7% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations. Now I want to remind you that the graduation requirement for ELA 10 includes the performance level of 3. So we actually have 70.7% of our students meeting the graduation requirement. This is all students that take the assessment. This was 2,429 students. So this included students who had to retake the assessment because they had not met the graduation requirement previously. So when we look at the first-time test takers, which is 1,739 students, we had 63.4% of our students at proficiency and 82.3% of our students meeting that graduation requirement. Again, the state ranked the levels for ELA 10. We increased 4.1 percentage points, and this was well above the state now. We increased our ranking to 10th in the state. Algebra 1 is similar to ELA 10 in the fact that proficiency is not necessarily meeting the graduation requirement, and we have students who are retaking the assessment because they have not passed it previously. So for our students who took Algebra 1, we had 35.9% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations, and 62.5% meeting that graduation requirement. This data does include our students who participated in the middle school. So they were first-time test takers, so they were included in the second graph as well. The second part includes only first-time test takers, which is 1,575 students, 510 of whom were middle school students taking for the first time. We did have an 82.2 proficiency in middle school alone. For all first-time test takers, our proficiency rate was 44.3%, and we had students, 71.0% of our students meeting the graduation requirement. Again, looking at state rankings, we're moved to 9th in the state, well above the state. The state actually declined in algebra, where we remained relatively flat. We also break out the data by race and special subgroups. So when we look at these student groups, first we have ELA 10. We combine all of the ELA together, so this is ELA 3 through 8 and includes ELA 10, all test takers during the spring. So when we looked at our data from 2015 to 2019, we've shown an increase over all racial groups over that time. And we've seen that in ELA, and we've also seen that in math. So we combined 3 through 8 and Algebra 1. So we have seen increases over all race groups. For the special groups, these are students who are receiving services based on their personal needs. So in here we have ADA, which is students who are eligible for services under the Americans with Disabilities Act, or what's commonly known as a 504 plan. Students who would be eligible for special education services or would have an individualized education plan. Students who qualify for limited English proficient services, or LEP. And then also students who qualify for free and reduced meals. So again, when we look at this data from 2015 through 2019, we have seen an increase in all of our service groups over this time. And that includes for ELA, and then our math data also shows increases from 2015 to 2019. When we also look at our state ranking for each assessment, so you can see we've gone from 2015, now we're in 2019 in the light green at the end. I would like to point out that in grades 3 and 4, our ranking, while we went up in ranking or stayed relatively the same, these were the two tests that were below the state average, and this is where we see that our students in 3rd and 4th grade are not performing as well as the rest of the state. Once we get to 5th grade, we are consistently above the state in both ELA and math. So you can see our ranking is, while it's less for grades 3 and 4, as we move into 5th grade and above, we're seeing rankings higher than the state in the upper half of the state. We see this both for math and for ELA. So you can see again, while we came up a good amount in math 3, and we did in math 4, we definitely do better in the later grades when our students have spent more time in our educational system.
Before you begin, Dr. Pugh, I mean, I think when I look at some of that data and I think about 3rd and 4th grade, I wonder if that's some of what we're trying to overcome as we think back to that KRA data. You know, we don't compete well in 3rd and 4th grade over time. You know, our students improve in ranking across the state. Certainly a credit to our staff and our students and the hard work that they do. But if that entry point for us is just a challenge. So long term, we're hoping our pre-K initiative is going to have a huge help in that. We're still several years away before those students will hit in significant numbers in 3rd grade. But we're hoping the work of our pre-K, K1, 2, we can turn around that 3rd and 4th grade ranking, get us in a better starting position, which will help our students compete at a much higher level in the future. Sorry.
It's okay. So I'll try to answer the complex question of how did we, our students and our teachers, receive these results? What did they do to make this progress? And then what are we planning quickly to adjust and continue to see our students progress quickly? So the first area of focus we have is our essential curriculum. This was all based on teacher work to design the curriculum around the outcomes that they hoped for all students. The benefit of your essential curriculum is that it is updated yearly and in real time based upon teacher feedback and on our analysis of student outcomes. This year we have new commitments and new tools to help teachers. We had groups working all summer to develop what we're calling learning plans, which would use aligned resources and assessments in a logical, sequential manner that would help teachers figure out how to take all of the information that students need to learn and put it in order, and then understanding what they know about their students, be able to modify based upon their own students' interests and needs. You've additionally, with your support and Dr. Michael's direction, invested a lot in providing primary resources. When the standards were new, there were no aligned resources, and so we've been very careful about selecting a resource for our teachers to be able to use with students. Over the past 3 years, we've been able to purchase instructional texts and materials, including digital materials, as well as enhanced classroom libraries at the elementary level, some of which you approved tonight. We also know that reading, voluminous reading is the best intervention, and the more that we can have our early learners reading, the better. So we've made a conscious effort to make sure that they have rich, authentic texts, nonfiction and fiction in front of them, and that they have choice at the early levels. We also know that having a system of instruction is important. So grades 6 through 12, we have a resource called Collections in the English. and it's a shared resource that all of those learning plans were built around this year. We have similar resources in math. We have Amplify Science, which is one of the highest rated resources for middle school science. And then we have Discovery Textbook in math in the middle school as well. Again, trying to help teachers put together all of the information they need, the assessments and the visuals and the supports for learners all in one place. Also, you've made a significant effort in human resources. Through this past 2 years, actually, increasing the pre-K and the classroom teachers, providing English learner teachers to meet the needs of our students, providing additional staff for behavior supports. This year coming up, we'll have district math lead teachers, which will allow other math teachers to go see math teachers who've had proven effectiveness with their students to serve as models. We've also invested in a second elementary content specialist and a district math achievement coordinator to help analyze the data, expanding the success that we've seen in the ELA model to the mathematics side. We've also invested in a supervisor of equity that we hope can bring us some other additional resources and ideas about how to meet the needs of all of our students, a secondary mentor teacher, a recruitment specialist, and mental health coordinators. These staff resources are specific and aligned to areas that we felt that we had needs. And so through your investment, we're hopeful that this will be a great support for teachers and students. As Dr. Michael spoke of, early learning access, this significant investment that you've made in pre-K expansion to eliminate these gaps early. While you don't see the results in this now, we do believe that we are starting from behind, and if we can catch up earlier, that our students will be able to be as competitive as every other student in the state. As of today, we had 1,146 enrollment packets sent to pre-K students, and at 12:30 today, we had 999 enrolled. Also, these EL supports, starting with students in pre-K, can really help our students begin to learn the language early so that they're starting at the same level playing field as their English-only peers. We had a number of students this year who took advantage of pre-K services who will be entering as a non-EL student because they've learned enough language to begin with their kindergarten peers.
I think board members sent you a note to that effect in the Friday updates. 29 students were tested, 25 students that could have been labeled EL. Normally in kindergarten, they never even entered the program as a result of the pre-K. So I thought that was pretty amazing results. You know, outstanding. Thanks to our pre-K teachers and our EL support team that really helped these children. So it's showing huge dividends if we can catch these children early.
And Ms. Moore would like to test those 4 again to make sure it wasn't just a bad test day, because she's not satisfied until it's 100%. But yes, the teacher in that classroom really did an amazing job. We've also invested in My IGDs and DIBELS, all language and letters of assessments that really would give us early warning signs if a student is not reading on level or doesn't have the underlying skills. So we're hopeful to begin with those tools this year that we will make up gaps before they become significant. And then finally, professional development. Significant investment in professional learning throughout the last year with new teacher induction and all of the workshops that we've had, Leadership Council, lead teacher training days, department leader training days. But I think through 2018 and 19, we held 415 workshops. So that's in 180 days, right? And then there were 5,881 teachers who participated in that. We had a full day with teachers on June 13th this past school year, and we sort of bookended the year. So we had a full day June 13th, and we had a full day August 27th with all teachers, and then work continued throughout the summer based on the work that was done on those 2 days. Through the summer of 2019, we held 194 workshops, and 5,358 people participated. So there was a significant effort this summer to make sure that teachers were prepared walking into the school year, and we do believe that has helped cyclically, and we believe that we had more attendance this year than in previous years. So we're hopeful that that continues the learning. And at this point, if you have any questions.
Colleagues, any questions?
I don't have any questions. I have a statement to make. I'm just really excited to see that the growth in this, even though it's not a very large growth. I know we're behind, and we are going in the right direction. It'll be really nice to see, once we get those pre-K and kindergarten up to third grade, to see where we've improved, because I think we're going to see that, but it's going to be the proof in the pudding 3-4 years out. But it's nice to see this gradual growth, throughout this period of time. And I know your staff and all the teachers, they're working very hard to get these up, and it's nice to see results like this. Even though they are small, it's a big step for us. I think that's really good, so congratulations to everybody who's worked very hard to get these numbers to where they are. So just want to say thank you.
Thank you. I had a conversation with a principal just today, and he was talking with his 4th and 5th grade teachers, and they were looking very closely at the data and looking at how the students were doing, and they were very pleased. They were like, wow, they're coming into us better than they've ever come into us before. So we really have work to do to move them forward, but they felt good about that. So.
Thank you both very much.
Do you want to comment on our first day of school? So far, by all reports, we've had an excellent day. Started my day in Pleasant Valley and traveled all across the county for about 6 hours. Didn't make it obviously to every school, but did make it to a number of schools and saw a lot of smiling faces. Both the teachers and the students were smiling. Administrators were smiling. ESP was smiling. So parents were happy. I couldn't tell dropping them off whether they were happy to drop them off or just excited to get their children back to school. But all in all, just really good atmosphere today. First day of school is always kind of a fun day for everybody to get back and see their friends and their new students and things. So reports everyone got home safely, and we're off to a good start. Thursday and Friday, we'll start in with pre-K. So many of the pre-K classrooms I visited were either dark because the pre-K teachers were out in the community visiting their students and welcoming them and getting to know them, or parents were in and they were having parent-teacher conference, kind of kicking off the pre-K year. So a lot of that will happen today and tomorrow. And then Thursday, half the pre-K students will come. Friday, the other half will come, and Monday will be our first day with everybody. So we'll kind of get our first full report of attendees and how everything goes with everyone attending on Monday. The information that Dr. Pugh and Ms. Markovich just shared will be provided to students for their individual reports next Friday. So I think that's Friday the 13th. I don't think that's a good thing or a bad thing, but students will get their individual reports on how they did on the MCAP testing, and parents can certainly review that. Generally, that information shows how your child did compared to others in their school, and how they did state and county-wide. Again, I just want to thank teachers, ESP administrators, community students, and parents for having a great day. We do want to do a couple promotional videos right now. If our team's ready to roll those, we've had a little help putting these together, and we want to continue to promote our pre-K. We still have room for pre-K students and also our safety vest program.
Is in style at Washington County Public Schools.
This year, we'll be using safety vests with pre-K and kindergarten students who ride the bus.
The vests will be worn at dismissal time. School staff will make sure students get to the correct bus and have them seated in the front rows.
Bus drivers will dismiss pre-K and kindergarten students first at each stop. These students must be met by a responsible adult.
Whoa! I think you're confused. The students wear the vest, not us.
Yeah, that does make sense. That does make sense. For Washington County Public Schools, safety is the top priority.
Be safe. Safety is in style at Washington County Public Schools.
This year, we'll be using safety vests with pre-K and kindergarten students who ride the bus.
The vests will be worn at dismissal time. School staff will make sure students get to the correct bus and have them seated in the front rows.
Bus drivers will dismiss pre-K and kindergarten students first at each stop. These students must be met by a responsible adult.
Whoa! I think you're confused. The students wear the vest, not us.
Yeah, that does make sense. That does make sense. For Washington County Public Schools, safety is the top priority.
Be safe.
At Washington County Public Schools, we believe it's incredibly important to give our community's children the best possible start to their education.
That's why we're going pre-K, offering classes at every elementary school.
If your child turns 4 by September 1st, we encourage you to enroll in a WCPS pre-K class.
You can call the school in your local community or visit the WCPS website for details.
Kindergarten families, don't forget, we'll look forward to seeing your children on Tuesday, September 3rd for the first day of school. Pre-K students, you're going to be coming to school on Thursday or Friday for your staggered start time. Have a great rest of your summer.
So thanks to Aaron Anderson for putting together our video. Obviously, thank you to our elementary principals. They're good sports, and they can kind of play the humorous role as well as the serious role. So thanks to all of them, and thanks to everybody for a great first day. We look forward to a great school year.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. We'll move on to personnel action. Dr. Bishop.
Good evening, Mrs. Williams, Dr. Michael, and board members. As discussed earlier in closed session, there's several staff changes for your review. And at this time, I'd like to ask for your approval of today's personnel actions.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the personnel actions submitted today.
Thank you, Mr. Rodner. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Bickford. All those in favor of the personnel actions as discussed earlier today? Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to reports to the board and board member committee reports. Mr. Mackley, good evening.
Nothing to report.
Nothing yet? The first
Nope.
day of school and nothing to report from student government. Look forward to hearing from you. Okay, Mrs. Murray.
Curriculum and Instruction will meet on Tuesday, September 24th at 4 p.m. in the board conference room.
Finance Committee met last Tuesday to discuss the fourth quarter budget adjustments, which you approved early tonight. We also got an update from Mr. Brandenburg on the end of the year health insurance fund balance, which is looking very healthy. And we reviewed the budget calendar, which would be presented to you, I assume, at a later meeting. And we did set another date, which will be October the 29th, 2 days before Halloween at 8 a.m. in the operations conference room.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kessler.
Facilities. We have not met since our last, during the summer, we took a month off, so we are back September the 10th next week at 8 o'clock in the morning, 3rd floor.
Mr. Kessler. Mrs. Fisher.
Policy Committee met last Wednesday, and since there had been no questions or concerns expressed over the 3 policies that were passed earlier this evening on second read, the committee okayed them for the vote. Several staff members then joined us at the meeting to discuss policy JLD on threat assessment, which of course passed on first read earlier this evening, and on JFH, the policy on bullying, harassment and intimidation, which also passed on first read earlier this evening. There were some very minor changes suggested for both those policies. This happens to be a very busy time for the policy committee, trying to keep up with new updates to existing policies as well as brand new policies that need to be created, required either through legislation or through our State Board of Education, and therefore we will be meeting and have been meeting most of the time twice a month. And our next 2 meetings will then be September 10th at 9:15 and September 24th at 9:15.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Mr. Ridenhour.
The HR committee met last Tuesday, got some fact figures on our continued staffing needs, which will be presented to the full board in the future. We have not set a future meeting at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Okay, we'll move on to miscellaneous business, future agenda items. In your packet, you received 6 future agenda items listed, and if you have no objections, we'll move forward with those. Coming up at our next meeting, we will have a report on discipline and suspensions. And then on October 1st, we have the presentation of the audited financial statements and the auditor's report. We have a summer school report coming up mid-October, October 15th. And again, on October 15th, we'll be taking a look at our schools, our school systems ESSA plan, Every Student Succeeds Act plan. And new teacher report November 5th, SAT and ACT data report on November 5th. So that's what we have up and coming. If you have any suggestions for future agenda items, please let a member of the Agenda Planning Committee know, and we'll do our best to get it on the agenda for an upcoming meeting. At this time, we'll move to board member comments. Mr. Ridenour, would you like to begin?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Mrs. Fisher.
Just hoping that everybody had a great first day back at school. Everything's been quiet, so I'm assuming that everything went well.
Mr. Gessert.
Nothing.
Yeah. Mr. Mackley? Let's start down there. Switch it up a little bit.
I just wanted to say it was nice to be back at school today, and I'm really excited for senior year this year.
That's very good year. Mrs. Murray.
I started out the day at Salem Avenue Elementary School, welcoming the staff and students back, and it is my 29th consecutive year spending my first day at Salem Avenue. And I hope to continue.
I saw your photo.
Mr. Bickford.
I just wanted to report that I was recently named to the Hagerstown Youth Advisory Council, which is choosing 9 youth from our community that will be looking at different issues, really of their own choosing, that they think need to be addressed in Hagerstown. And it's been very gratifying because we put out a call for applications and received 24 and reviewed them one by one. And these are all students ranging from 8th grade up till senior year. And how gratifying it is when you see very professional applications, well thought out written words, and then even when we put them through a pretty rigorous exercise where we had them come up with a possible plan for what they would do about the opioid epidemic, and within 15 minutes got several excellent ideas, that it's very hard to whittle those 24 names down to 9. And so I thought we must be doing something right in our school system if even in just that small call for people to apply from all demographics, they were all extremely impressive. So I thought that our kids are in good hands and maybe our future's in good hands. So, so it's been very gratifying so far. So that's all I have to say.
All right. And I have nothing this evening. So if no one has anything else, would you like the final word? All right, then we'll adjourn. Thank you.